person that rented the space?
Yeah.
Rachel Notley about her
But
candidacy.
what kind of message does that send if the official opposition is telling Albertans which media can and can't ask questions?
I can't speak to that.
I understand you're just doing your job. I can understand that, but I just came here to ask questions respectfully of the members opposite. I'm not here to start trouble.
Yeah.
Neither is the gentleman that you were speaking to earlier. So, I mean, what's the harm in asking questions?
I understand that. Again, this area is what they've booked.
Yeah.
So I can't really.
Yeah. And who specifically said that certain members of the press can't come?
I couldn't say that.
Couldn't say that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's unfortunate.
So joining me now is that journalist, Rebel News journalist, Alex Dhaliwal. I guess getting his initiation into being a Rebel News journalist. Alex, how's it going? Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila, for having me on the program. It's my pleasure.
And I say jokingly that that's your Rebel News initiation, but it really is. Because back in 2016, I was thrown out of a press conference by Rachel Notley. It was a joint press conference with her and Justin Trudeau at the legislature. I'm a lifelong Albertan. I'm an Alberta journalist. I went there to ask some questions, to hold these two politicians to account on behalf of the people. And I was tossed out by an armed sheriff. Now, at the time, most of the independent media in Alberta were actually leftists. So I was sort of kind of new on the scene. And they tossed me out. Before I get to you, Alex, let's just show a clip of that right here.
Interpretation. For today's event.
We already spoke to Darcy Henton. He said there should be no problem to come in. What? Sorry, why is that? Sorry, why?
Now, Alex, we are, as I say, known for getting thrown out of things. And it's not because of our bad behavior. You couldn't have been calmer. What were you going there to do? What was the press conference about?
So, Sheila, the press conference really was about the NDP trying to make a ploy to why supporters should, or why voters in the upcoming provincial election should vote for them versus the UCP. They intended to make some funding commitments and what they would do to address the vacancy rate in downtown Calgary. Now, one of the issues that we've seen exacerbated in recent weeks, particularly in the downtown core, is rampant crime. Notably, we've seen a number of fatal shootings and stabbings. In particular, we saw a fatal shooting occur just outside of the Chinese consulate. So take that for what it's worth. And my job, I intended to go to the conference just to ask two simple questions. One, what would the Alberta NDP do differently than the UCP? Because if we're going to address the rampant wave crime that's hit Canadians right across the board, West Coast to East Coast, then surely we should be having these difficult conversations regardless of partisan stripe. And secondly, I was going to ask if Rachel Notley, leader of the Alberta NDP, would apologize on behalf of some of the anti-police rhetoric that some of her candidates have said in the past. I'll give you a couple of examples here, Sheila. So NDP MLA Rod Loyola, he had made a Facebook post about 2012, about a decade ago, where he said having a police badge in Edmonton is licensed to quote unquote beat up people. But here's the ticker. What we heard from Drew Farrell, a former Calgary City Councilwoman, was far worse. What she said was that she wouldn't be surprised if suspected incidences of domestic violence within households of law enforcement went underreported because, quote unquote, police officers bring a sick rage with them to their households, which is just mind boggling to me why we would even attempt to demonize those who do their best to protect our communities and keep us safe. Sure, we want to hold those who abuse their power accountable, but you can't have that honest conversation when you are demonizing an entire police force. It's just patently absurd to me, but it was unfortunate. I never got to ask those questions because, first of all, the NDP press briefer on Monday was delayed about 30 minutes. Myself Keane Bexley from Countersignal and Nigel Hannaford from Western Standard were there. And while Nigel wasn't kicked out, Keane and I were. And I went quietly. I did have a calm conversation with the security guard. Listen, hey, I'm not here to stir up trouble. I'm here to just respectfully ask questions, because as members of the Free Press, I think we have a right to ask those questions on behalf of not only our viewers, but on behalf of the broader public. And it was unfortunate I didn't get to ask those questions. And, as we've seen through the video clip that I recorded, this isn't just a one-off situation where independent journalists get booted out. It's, this has happened consistently, especially over the past 5-6 years, where we've seen state-owned media be incentivized to essentially just propagate what the government wants them to do. And when we, as independent journalists, want to present an alternative side of things, not necessarily a conservative spin on things, but an alternative side to the story, we're canceled for it. And it just boggles my mind, because we simply just want to add to the conversation, add those different perspectives so that we can have a more well-rounded discussion moving forward on serious issues. But it doesn't seem like the NDP want to have that, because they want to control the narrative rather than actually solve the issues at hand. And, what we saw on Monday was just evidence of that.
I'm glad you mentioned the questions that you wanted to ask and the very real problems happening in the major cities here in Alberta. And it does stem from progressive policies. So you went there with real, clear, concise questions on issues that matter to Albertans. We know what the UCP are doing to address crime in the downtown cores in both of our major cities. They're deploying extra sheriffs to try to help, to try to get a handle on it. You wanted to know what the NDP would do and what they're going to do to address the anti-police rhetoric in their own party. So you went there prepared with very real questions. You weren't there to cause a scene. We never are, actually. Even when we're getting booted out, we're like, for example, when I got booted out, I think I apologized 3 times. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're kicking me out. We go there to do our jobs, to ask questions, to show that there is more than one homogenous viewpoint on all these issues. And we weren't even given that opportunity. You were not disruptive. You were polite. But the NDP didn't want to hear from you. And I noticed Rachel Notley tweeting, I think it might have been yesterday or even early this morning, saying, oh, and here I am. I took lots of questions from journalists. Yeah, it's pretty easy to take lots of questions from journalists when you kick out all the prickly ones before they even get started. And they accused the Western Standard, by the way, of being racist and sexist, I think. I don't think they could have gotten away with accusing you of that for obvious reasons. But, they didn't even let you get in the door to ask those questions. And you're so right to point out that, we're not there to even push a conservative agenda. We're just there to ask questions on behalf of the people who can't.
Yeah. And, I just want to state for the record that, the conversation I did have with the security guard, I understand that he was just doing his job. And I just want to say that I hold no grudges against him. He was just doing his job and wanted to make sure that the event that the NDP had booked went smoothly. But, I did pose to him, as members of the Free Press, why is it that we can't ask questions? Is it because we're part of media that the NDP knows that they won't get softball questions from? Is it media that they know they can't, coerce into funneling a certain narrative? The reason he gave to me was because the NDP had made a private booking, and therefore I wasn't invited. So naturally, in a free society, post-COVID, we can't ask those tough questions because we're not the right type of people, right type of journalists to be asking questions, because we can't be controlled in any which way.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.